Hi, everybody, and welcome to Stories from the Storysphere. I'm Jay Perry, one of the founders of Storysphere Central, which is a community of curious humans that explore the hidden stories that shape our lives. Stories of challenge and inspiration, disappointment and joy, perceived limitations, and unbounded wonder. And today I'm privileged to speak with Dave Delaney. Dave is the published author of New Business Networking. He's a corporate trainer, executive coach who's made it his mission to help people and organizations improve how they communicate, connect, and lead. And he's trusted by companies like few you might have heard of: Google, FedEx, LinkedIn, UPS. Also, host of the popular ADHD Wise Squirrels podcast. I know Dave for his compassion and generosity, energy, storytelling, humor. And so today we're going to explore some of the stories that make him a sought after speaker and creative partner, and also just a good friend. So, good afternoon, Dave.
Yay, Jay. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Um, but just to get us going, can you give us sort of a high level, like what are the most important things in your life? How did you get to where you are? Just, we'll dig deeper, but just looking for the high level right now.
Yeah, yeah. And there's always so many stories to share. But um, over the last few years, over some time when I've been working for myself for about 13 years and hit this sort of down period and really did a lot of soul searching and trying to figure out, what I want to be when I grow up and all the different personality assessments and strengths assessments and all that stuff, and really landed on the fact that my strongest talent is communication. And just don't ask my wife. But we can always improve how we communicate. And so I realized that like everything, all of my talents lie under this umbrella of communication. And while that's a pretty big overarching word, communication. There's a lot there. Um, I've determined and realized that like all of my talents kind of lie under that. So for example, whether it's my background with digital marketing, promotions, publicity, that kind of work that I've done, always in communication, how we communicate online. I love networking. That's why I wrote a book about it. And I'm an extrovert and love people. And so communicating with people in person at conferences, trade shows, networking events. I've run my own over the years. Another indicator of like how much I love, uh, you know, connecting and communicating with folks. We talk about AI nowadays and how to use that in an ethical way to communicate, perhaps, or how not to communicate. Presentations. I do a lot of keynote presentations, public speaking, workshops on communication. And then I love comedy, and I've dabbled in stand up, and certainly have done a fair share of improv over the years, having trained with Second City and having my own troupe in Ireland when I lived in Ireland. And
All right, so we
so
got to
yeah,
stop. We got to stop you there because
so much to
it's
cover.
so
Yeah.
much in there. But that last thing, right? I know you were born in Toronto,
Yes.
and I know you spent a little time in Ireland, and that you
Yep.
now live in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm not quite sure how all of that transpired. You got a short story about that?
Yeah. There's a song by Steve Earle called "Galway Girl," which is a great song. What's his face? Some other person, Ed, whatever, Sheeran has his own song called Galway Girl as well. So go figure. Something to do with meeting girls in Galway, I think. I lived in Galway, Ireland for a couple of years, met my wife there, who was my waitress. And that is itself a fun story, which, you said keep it brief, so I will do my best. But she's from Jackson, Tennessee, of all places, which is between Nashville and Memphis. So not Irish. And yeah, so we fell madly in love and got married and had two kids, and we still have them. They're 11 and a half months apart, Irish twins, as they say. So we should have seen it coming. And moved to Nashville to raise the kids. Both kids were born in Toronto. And then we moved south to Nashville to raise them, to be closer to grandparents and more, extended family to kind of help raise them. So that's why I'm in Nashville.
Wow. One of the things we talk about in Storysphere Central are plot twists. The things that happen when we're in life, when we have a story and we sort of think we see the future and where it's going, and then something happens. Sometimes it's a, a downer. Sometimes it's like, whoa, didn't see that one coming. And sometimes it's like, oh, wow. So when you when you went to Ireland, was this on the radar? I'm here looking for a girl in Galway.
No, not at all. I backpacked Europe in '96, fell in love with Ireland on that trip. I went to multiple countries. I was just by myself, finding myself kind of deal. Turns out myself was under the couch the whole time back at home. I just didn't look there. Um, so yeah, so I was traveling Europe and fell in love with Ireland. I'm a Delaney, so kind of in the DNA already. And so '98 went home for the year, '97 in Toronto, and decided I'm going to move to Ireland for a year because I wanted not to be a tourist there in the summer, which is, about 2 weeks. It's when every Irish person is just beating red, burnt from the sun that they don't see the rest of the year. Um, Actually, that's a joke. They do get a lot of sun, but I digress. Yeah, and so yeah, lived there. I lived in Ireland for a couple of years, and then yeah, you know, we I ended up um, spending that year, and then I met my wife that year. But then, got odd jobs, and then we would also backpack and travel around Europe together, where we would like run out of money, get jobs, save up the money to get back to Ireland. And so Ireland was sort of home base for a few years. We also lived in Edinburgh for about a year, and Prague for several months, and Italy for a few months as well. So just bumming around.
So sort of a soul of a gypsy in there a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So I got a question about, I'm going to tax your memory here. Maybe not.
Mm.
But in your memory, do you have any stories that um, really shaped the way you experience the world now?
Oh yeah.
Things that just stick out, like you just can go back and go, wow, when that happened, or when I met that person, or when I heard this thing, life just, and boy, it's with me still. It's that kind of powerful story.
Uh, you want a happy one or a not happy one?
You can pick. You want to,
Um,
but just that, exploring the
yeah,
power of stories. And I think one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing at Stories for Central is that I think we haven't been well educated in the power of story.
yeah,
Um, and it is so essential to a human's experience of life. It's the way we, at least that's our thesis, is it's the way we experience life is as a story or a series of stories.
yeah.
And I find it's useful for people to really get to the core of understanding how powerful they are. Because if we don't, we risk not respecting them and they start to run us rather than we being the storyteller. So that's why I'm curious
Yeah.
to see if there's a story that pops out that's like, wow, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the two that come to mind, and one of them is obviously about my ADHD diagnosis a couple of years ago, which led to Wise Squirrels, the podcast, and all the stuff I'm doing in that space. And then the other is more to do with trauma as a kid that led to me becoming a people pleaser. And all these years later, hitting on something with my therapist at the time who helped me think through some childhood stories that helped me understand myself better and why I am a people pleaser, which comes down to really of fear of upsetting people for, and the ramifications that might come from that fear. So um, the podcast is a better, happier story because I'm thrilled in that. But part of my own ADHD diagnosis and the subsequent treatment and therapy that I've had helped me to lead to that older story that I wasn't even. I mean, I was well aware of the story, but um, I never connected it to why I am a people pleaser to a fault. And that helped me kind of look at things differently. So it helped me kind of, yeah, understand myself better and maybe address some of but I find also, it's such an important point in the stories we tell is that they're stories. And so my interpretation of any story in my life is different like than your interpretation. Right now, we'll get off this recording later and you'll remember specific things and I'll remember specific things and you're sitting in that chair and I'm sitting in this chair and so we'll have a shared experience, something that is, obviously it's happening, it's real, there's consistencies, but at the same time, we'll tell the story to ourselves later in how we interpret that. And so I think that's an important point too about being mindful. You mentioned about the stories we choose and just being mindful in the moment and maybe reframing, not to deny stories or our past or trauma or whatever it is, but kind of reshaping. Like I think such an important thing is in the now. It's in the present. It's us having this conversation, right? And then more so in the future because the past are stories. And so I think that's an important thing. It's not to deny the past or anything, but I think, yeah, I think there's really something to this. And the last thing I'll mention here that got me thinking about this a long time ago before I was diagnosed is this point that I had read, and I've heard it reiterated so many times, and I've shared it a lot on my podcast, is about that when you reflect too much on the past, that can lead to depression. And when you think too much of the future, that can lead to anxiety. And so the key thing is to be present and to be in the now. And so if you have a business or a career or whatever, adulting is hard. But yeah, you have to plan for the future. And yes, you have to look at your financials from in the last quarter or whatever worked, whatever didn't. So it's not to say you can't think of the past and the future, but I think especially for those late diagnosed with ADHD, who are the people that I speak with the most, coaching and in my podcast, it's very important to be careful not to fall down that hole because with ADHD, the most common comorbidities, as I've learned, is about anxiety and depression, and so we don't really want to trigger those so much. So we really have to be careful. But I think the advice is good for anyone.
No, it's a great distinction. I actually hear both of those stories as positive stories. Um,
Yeah,
it's not that I lack empathy for, hurtful experiences in our childhood, and although some may be more accurately talked about as trauma, um, I'm not one to define that word. I'm not qualified to define it, but I think we all have the experience because we're human beings with brains that were initially built for survival to catalog stories in a way that at least our brain interpreted as this will keep me safe. If I'm a people pleaser, that'll keep me safe.
yeah,
Um, so the term I use, Dave, is archives. I think we've archived these stories, so they're all there, and then something might trigger them and they
yeah.
pop up, and it's not even thinking. It's not like I'm telling myself a story. It's there like a jukebox, and there it is, and it shapes my life.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, yeah, when you think of like you know, traditional humans, right? Like the old school uh to your point, like yeah, your neighbor, sibling, parent eats these berries and dies and you're like, "Okay, I shouldn't eat those berries
right.
and I'll eat these berries," right? So again, that's the story that shapes you and makes you remember, okay, if anything, sure hope I don't eat those berries, right? So yeah, you're spot on there for sure.
And I think our brains have developed in a way that they can correctly interpret what's truly dangerous, what's life-threatening, and also misinterpret what. what is
Ah,
life-threatening.
yeah,
But
just turn off the
the other
TV.
story, the ADHD diagnosis, which is one I've heard from a number of people, which I mean, that's a real plot twist. You've been living your life with a certain set of expectations and a bunch of stories about it, and then this comes along and it's suddenly like, whoa,
Yeah,
a whole new realm of story opens up of possibility and, it's just reining in all of these things.
yeah,
And it's a shift in identity for many of the people I've talked about. So
yeah.
how did that change your sense of what was possible in your life?
Well, it helped me. So I describe it as like looking at my life through the lens of ADHD, knowing what I know now about it, and how, like, one key thing is to give myself more grace. All right. I would often be hard on myself. I still am, but I would beat myself up all the time because I didn't accomplish the thing I had planned to accomplish in the day or the month or whatever. And now, because I understand what I call my operating system, right? I understand my noggin now. I understand ADHD, and, not a doctor, as I always say on my podcast, right? Like, I'm not a doctor. Um, but I understand now, and I can look at myself through that lens, and as a result give myself more grace, as I say, because if I run out of steam or if I get distracted with something creative and, that takes hours, in a way, that's how the podcast started, right? That's how Y Squirrels was born. I was like, I need to podcast and share my experiences for others, and it's really grown. So yeah,
And I
I
would
think
be
that,
remiss in not asking you, where did the name come from? It's such a great
yeah.
name.
Thanks. Yeah. I was driving and thought of it. I was thinking about calling it something squirrel because of the meme that was, the memes about ADHD and the squirrel, which comes from Doug the dog from the movie Up, that distracted dog meme. And, but I didn't want to call it something that was demeaning, and, or that made too much light or fun of ADHD, because it's a bit of a bitch, pardon my French. Um,
I
and
think the
so
French say
I,
biche.
yes, c'est bon. Uh, but I feel like we've, when you're late diagnosed with ADHD, you learn, you realizing you've developed coping mechanisms through your life, ways to do the things you needed to do without realizing you have ADHD, or you mask, these words I wasn't really familiar with before. Unmasking, if you're nervous, you might end up drinking too much at a bar or something. Um, but these coping mechanisms and masking result in finding ways to be successful still, despite despite having ADHD and not knowing it. And so, before we hit record today, I was telling you about one of my guests, Bob Dempsey, who was the director of the NASA International Space Station for 16 years without knowing he had ADHD. So it's not to say you can't be a great success with ADHD. It's just that, diagnosing it and treating it is important. So I don't even know if I answered that question, but
Well, I'm just because I'm still back with why squirrels. I mean, I was
oh
with
yes,
you the whole
wise,
time, but it's not
wise.
that, at least the way I'm hearing you, it's not the squirrel that's wise. It's that it says you want to combine wisdom with squirrel.
Yes,
Is
I
that
forgot that part.
is
Yes.
that the
So wise, yeah, you're spot on. So wisdom, I say how wisdom comes. You accrue wisdom through being successful in your life, no matter what that looks like. You're still here, you're still alive, you're doing whatever, you've made it this far. And so you've developed coping mechanisms and things in your life to get the work done, basically, get it done. And so we get wise with these experiences and knowledge of what works. Every productivity expert or developer who creates a solution for productivity, I would be willing to bet that all of them have ADHD, whether they know it or not. um, so you start to think that way. So wise is from the wisdom we've accrued, squirrels is from squirrel.
got it? Thank you, because I hadn't gotten that before. I got it now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yay.
yeah, yeah.
And the you just got me thinking about wisdom
Yeah.
and what's the relationship to story? Does it have something to do with to be wise is to recognize life as story and to recognize um, when stories have us versus we are using story or
Mm-hmm.
creating stories?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, just think of the Neanderthal that I mentioned earlier, who witnessed their sibling eat the wrong berries and die, and learned from that story not to eat those berries and succeeded in life to whatever, the ripe old age of 16 or whatever, however long they lived. Um, but that's wisdom there. That's knowledge. And to be able to attach it to that story, I think is key, right? Because to know something, like to know the stove is hot, but not to understand what burning is. Well, I know the stove is hot, so I should put my hand on it, right? Well, no, I've burned myself on the stove in the past. I know, and so it's that story, the memories of that pain and that get triggered. And that's wisdom there. You've learned that the stove is hot, shouldn't touch it, right?
Well, I could keep going down this road a while, but there's some other things I wanted to ask you about, and
Sure, yeah.
specifically having to do with tapping into your experience and skill set. Um, one of the one of the concepts we use at Storysphere Central is what we call story tweaking. Um, and it's where you find that there is this story and it has some utility. We think all stories are language put to use, so all stories have some utility. But by tweaking
Mhm.
it, we can get more utility, or we can make it more beautiful, or more effective, or more productive. And
Mhm.
one of the things I've seen in videos that I've watched of yours is when you make this distinction that's used in improv, which many people know the yes and concept, but then you tweak it to call it nice and could you talk
Yeah.
about that and share where that came from and how it's meaningful and useful to you?
Yeah. I kind of jumped on this nice sort of method of approaching things with kindness and approaching things with empathy and that's work as well as just life in general. But professionally speaking, you know, a friend of mine in a mastermind was like, Dave, you're so nice. Why don't you just call things nice? And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. I could do that. But the reason why I switched for those familiar with yes and where you accept what's given to you and then you build upon it. So like if you've seen an improv show, you ask for what's called a give from the audience. So what profession am I? And somebody says, you're a plumber. And like, okay, I'm a plumber, right? You accept that. And in improv training, you never hear yes and uttered during a professional improv show, or whose line is it anyway, or something. You wouldn't hear the term yes and. However, that is sort of one of the main foundations, the main things, the main rules of improv, where when you train and you study improv and you rehearse and you learn it early on, everybody's on the same page to use yes and the more that you do that, the more the troupe, your fellow actors in your cast or in your group or improvisers in general, they all know this rule. And so you learn, you kind of rewiring, reprogramming your brain to accept and build upon it, accept and build upon it. Yes. And I'm also a plumber with only one foot and I'm going to hop around and fix pipes. I don't know. Right. So, yes. So it's yes. And now in business, unfortunately, we can't approve every idea. If you're the CEO and someone's, on your team has pitched you an idea for a new product, you can't say yes and let's take $1 million and give it to R&D, right? But you can say nice and tell me more about the idea, or nice and let's grab a coffee after the meeting so I can understand the idea better, or nice, and let's talk to customer service and see if this solves a problem that our customers have, et cetera. And so using nice and in sort of a professional setting and a business setting kind of sets the scene so that, and again, when I do workshops and training with my business future forth or my own consulting work, I work with teams and leaders to teach them how to use this nice and idea in house. And when everybody's on the same page with an organization or a department and they're all using nice and, it's hilarious after my training because I hear like, they'll be sitting around a board table and somebody will have an idea and the boss will say, no, we can't do that. We don't have the budget, or no, that's dumb. And they're like, and he's like, nice, and let's talk about it some more. And it's great, right? So you start to empower your people by listening to them and accepting. And the more people use nice and at work in that sort of scenario, the more empowering, accepting they are, and the faster that company leads to innovation, and people feel better about sharing ideas. So that's how Nice and was born.
Well, great. It's such a great example of a tweak. You took something and there's something in common between them, and yet they are distinct. Uh, I used to make money doing improv, actually. That's how I made my
Yeah.
living for a year.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
amazing.
and and I know that that experience of being there as close to the present as we can,
Hmm.
and we're using our imagination and thinking, oh, this would be a great place to go. And
Yeah.
then one of the other actors says something that destroys the thing I was thinking of.
Hmm.
And so that ability to let go of expectations or let go of things and embrace whatever is in the moment, I
Yeah.
found to be one of the best trainings I ever had.
Yeah, it is
Uh,
because it teaches you not just acceptance, but as a like a team member, as a junior person, as a leader, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you're you're empowering the people around you um by using nice and at work, right? So yeah, I mean the example I always use is an actor comes out on stage, let's say it's me, and I start just digging a hole in silence, and I'm thinking I'm a pirate and I'm digging for gold, buried treasure or something. And then another actor on my troupe comes out and says, I can't believe grandma's gone. Then suddenly it's like, oh, I could say, no, no, I'm digging for gold. And then the audience would be like, wait, what? Like, I thought that's confusing. So instead, I'm like, yeah, I miss her so much. What was that thing she used to say to you? And then the other actor would fill it in. So you're basically just accepting what the other actor in that scene has suggested. Um, and it's yeah, like life doesn't always go the way we want, and sometimes we just have to accept things, right?
I'm hearing it as plot twist practice. Um,
Yes,
that you're actually welcoming plot twists into your life, or certainly into this set of circumstances,
yes,
as opposed to trying to hold on to something. We get a story, we get connected to it or attached to it, and now we're really trying to manage life so that the story turns out the way I think it ought to turn out. And in a way, you're strangling life. You're strangling what's possible in that
yeah,
moment.
yeah. So when I talk about nice and in so I have a keynote presentation I do called the Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And the reveal to the audience is, or to the team, is that that secret weapon is improv, and how we can use these skills. There's other things as well in that, but I do the workshop. If they want me to do the workshop, I do the workshop as well. And actually, it's more of a kind of improv lesson, but there's more to it than that. But I say that because the when you learn, and you might recall this too, when you learn yes and in improv training, you also learn yes but. And so, yes, but is basically like what's called a block, right? So, as I described, dig in that hole. I'm thinking I'm a pirate. The actor comes in and says, "Grandma's gone." If I say, yes, but let's look for gold instead, kind of weak. And so you're kind of blocking it. Or, and just as like if the CEO, you pitch the CEO an idea and she says, nice, but we don't do that, or nice, but that's not available. And in the presentation, I always point out that it's one T in but. So you're not saying nice but. So there's no calls to HR. So you go through that exercise again using nice but, and you realize what blocking means, and what you're basically saying, no, we don't do that, or no, that's a bad idea.
I'm wondering whether there's also something maybe under the surface here a little bit. One of the things we talk about at Storysphere Central um, is becoming a better partner with our brains,
Hmm.
which in many ways is recognizing and appreciating the survival mechanism of our brain. We don't want to get rid of it. Without that,
Hmm.
we're in deep doo-doo. Um, However, we also want to recognize that it is programmed in a way, or parts of our brain are programmed in a way that if we don't recognize that and don't have the ability to interrupt it and actually access different parts of our brain, um, more creative parts, which is sort of where this goes. You're actually shifting from survival to creativity.
Yeah.
Um, and when you say nice, it's I think it's telling my brain, it's okay. Somebody said it's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I can relax. I can come off, red alert because somebody said nice as opposed to nah, which immediately is like, there's a threat here.
Yeah. 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 It just makes you feel better hearing that.
So it sort of leads on to this other thing that I think you're well qualified to talk to about and maybe to teach me and other people about is story creation. Like, what does it take to create a humorous story with impact? Because that's
Hmm.
that's what I've seen in your work. You have a way of finding the humor in something, but it's not a laugh off kind of humor. It's a laugh in order to have an impact. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So how do I do it?
well, yeah. I mean, there's one thing to use humor and there's another to be funny, right? Um, and actually getting back to the improv thing for a second, like when you first take improv 101, there's always some joker in the group who thinks he's hilarious. It's usually a guy, and he's loud and just like, look at me. And he's usually the one that doesn't come back for the next class. Um, and what I'm saying is basically that, like, it's not so much about being the center of attention or trying to be like the funniest, but using humor in life is just a way to ease tension. It's a way to humanize a moment. It's a way to build connection, and to connect with somebody. And obviously, there's the right and wrong kind of humor given this circumstance or the person you're communicating with, of course. But at the same time, I think nobody likes someone who's just humorless, right? I mean, somebody who's just like boring and just like always uptight, or no fun. Those are not the people you want to spend time with. It's the people that shed a little light, do a little joke. And so, like, I try to, it's part of my, it's not like a written rule, but like when I'm out in the world in a day, I try to make people laugh or smile at least. So, like, if I'm at the grocer, and I'm checking out, I'll ask the person, like, how's your day going? And they'll be like, oh, it's okay. It's not that, whatever. And I'm like, oh, are you just starting your shift? And I'll just like have a little chit chat and say something, maybe hopefully say something a little humorous that'll at least, make them smile or giggle. And yeah, I think it's just a way to, yeah, bring a little light in a moment. And I think taking yourself too seriously is never a good way to go. Certainly, not always, or Yeah, taking yourself too seriously is just, it's, that's,
Well,
I don't know. I
nice.
think humor is
And
humanity, right? Nice, and yeah,
nice.
exactly. So
And I'm
yeah,
still thinking that I keep exploring this. I don't think I've got the ultimate answer yet. I work on it for myself and in teaching others, but the actual creating of a story um, that is sticky, that changes the direction of life or an outcome,
yeah,
as opposed to just some kind of oh, I'll be more positive. There are
yeah.
so many stories we change or tell, but they're momentary. We feel good for just a little while. But I just noticed that when you're on stage, you tell stories that are both humorous, and I think I'm with you on that. I think it connects people. It's again being a better partner with our brains because it sets our brains at ease. So you can say things that perhaps people couldn't hear if
Yeah.
it was a threatening message. But I think the people I work with often still struggle with how do I create that? Where do I
Mhm.
start? Are there certain ingredients? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I sort of answered your question before with not really, I didn't answer it well because you asked kind of how to bring that humor in, how to find it.
Well, that's
And
why
I
I gave you
answered
a yes
and I
and. That's what's
yeah,
so
right, right.
useful about yes and.
Right, right. Yeah, and I answered sort of why do it of humanizing and things, but I think how to do it. I think one of the key things with comedy and humor that I find uh, is relatability, and it's making it relatable. So if you hear a stand-up comedian joke about something that is completely foreign to you, you have no idea what it is, that joke may go right over your head. You don't know who that person is they referenced or that company or whatever the comedian's joking about. So if he's or she, in this case, if she's joking about like some sort of maybe she's in a different market, maybe she's doing stand-up comedy in Japan and she mentions like Ford cars or something and they're not there. I don't know. It's a terrible example, but it might not go as it may not be as funny because they're not familiar with that brand, let's say, in that example. But if the joke was more about cars, right? Brakes and gas, am I right? You're making it more relatable. Have you ever driven down the road and someone cut you off? Yeah, it happens to everybody who drives, right? And every passenger probably too. Um, so I think the key is to make it relatable. Um, and respectful in a sense of like not talking down to somebody or not trying to approach things in sort of a civil level way, I think also helps. So, it's when, if the boss is, reprimanding a team member for something, I mean, they could add some humor in there to lighten the load, and make it a little less abrasive that way. So I think being respect and relatable, I think are maybe two of the key things. Because if you come in, if a comedian comes in and says you're all a bunch of jerks, and whatever, you're probably not going to go back to another one of their shows, right? So I think relatable and respectable
Wow.
or
Uh, I'll give
respectful
you
is
give you
important.
another yes and here.
Yeah.
Because as you're talking, you're triggering things up here, and one of the ways my brain tends to work is that always true? Is there another example of something that's opposite? And one of the things that came up was, you remember the comedian Don Rickles?
Yeah, of course.
I don't
Yeah.
know if everybody knows Don Rickles, but he was famous as an insult comedian,
Yeah.
and it was almost an honor for him to insult you.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about as
Yeah.
relatable. But as I've thought about that, I thought, well, he's actually saying things that I would say to myself.
Yeah.
Not, it's not that he's just this other person who's putting me down. And there was this great story I remember about it that he was at a restaurant with a date once, and he sees Frank Sinatra sitting at another table. Uh, and he goes up to Frank Sinatra and says, "Hey, Frank, would you do me this favor? I'm with this date here, and if you would just come over before you leave and just say hi, it would really impress her." And he goes, "Oh, sure, okay." So he goes back, he's at his table, and a minute later, Frank Sinatra comes up and goes, "Don, good to see you," everything. And Don Rickles goes, "What the hell are you doing? You're interrupting me. I'm having dinner with my date."
That's amazing. He was the best. Yeah. Yeah. If anybody's not familiar, go Google, go on YouTube and look up Don Rickles. Yeah. He was amazing. That's
It
hilarious.
almost seems to me like there's something about the come from. There's something about the who you're being when you engage in it. It isn't, even if it sounds mean, it's not mean-spirited. It's
Right.
somehow a celebration of being human. I don't know if I'm making too much of it, but
No, well, I think part
that's
of
the
it
way
too
I
is,
get you on stage too. It's like you're really
yeah.
celebrating being human.
Yeah, I mean, I also think like meeting expectations is important too, right? So like if you ran into Don Rickles and he insulted you, you wouldn't feel bad because you're like, well, that's Don Rickles. Like there was some restaurant I haven't been. We were going to go with the kids years ago in Chicago, I think it is, and it's somewhere near the baseball stadium there. I know nothing about sports, although the Blue Jays are doing really well. Go Jays! Um, and and the restaurant there, they're like abusive to you when you like they're known for like yelling obscenities at you and just making like, but they're known for that. So people go to this place with the expectations of just being, yelled at by the staff. And so because people expect that and that's part of the experience, then it's okay, right? And again, Don Rickles never would have like, you know, just walked past some handicapped person walking down the street and said something terrible, right? Like he wasn't, I expect he wasn't like that to your point, right? He would, you would expect to be insulted. It's like Conan O'Brien used to have Triumph the Insult Dog. That was
Right.
another good one. Uh, so, yeah,
Well, one
yeah.
of the
And
things
any
I,
of the roasts too, any of the comedy roasts, which sometimes
yeah,
get
which
the parts
are,
that aren't
yeah,
funny when you watch a roast. Um, if you watch a roast, yeah, some of it's like, it's not, that's kind of mean. It's not very funny because it's mean. It's not very funny, some of it. But then other bits are like, whoa, that's hilarious. All right. So again,
it's one of the things I've been playing with, and I'm finding some success with it myself, and encouraging other people to experiment and get back to me to see how it works, is in creating a story, you start with love or passion or some strong emotion, because that's one of the things that's going to make it sticky.
mm,
It's, that it's not just a head story. It's got feeling to it.
mm,
And then you use your imagination, because that actually accesses a different part of your brain. So now it is like that improv place where somebody says, "Oh, so you're digging grandma's grave." And suddenly you can't respond out of survival. If you try, and I've been there, if you try, like nothing comes up. You're frozen. You
yes.
have to access a different part of your brain that is the neurons and synapses that allow for imagination. So if you can have that strong emotion, use your imagination, and then have an intention to have an impact.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons I brought it up, is that I see that in the way you work, is that there is an emotion. You really care about the work that you're doing. You care about the audience. You care about the impact. You're using your
Yes.
imagination in ways I don't think people who come to see you work have seen that. They're not going to go, "Oh, yeah, that reminds me of the guy who did blah blah blah."
Yeah.
It's it's absolutely Dave Delaney, and its impact. I know when I went to your website and just looked at videos, there was a person after person who went, "Man, Dave came to our thing and did this," and so
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
that
I mean,
ring true to you in some way? I'm just,
it
again,
does.
trying
I
to help
mean,
people understand how to create their own stories that work
yeah.
better for themselves. So we're sort of
I,
looking at how you do it for an audience and then seeing, can I internally do this for myself?
yeah. I think With public speaking especially, and workshops as well, but certainly with speaking, and when I teach people presentation skills as well, for me personally, it's always enlighten, empower, entertain. So I enlighten audiences with new skills, new tools, new insights, new technologies, whatever it is. I try to leave them with some actionable, some takeaways that they find valuable for whatever the purposes of that engagement, let's say. So I enlighten them with new ideas. I empower them by giving them permission to use what they've applied, or to apply what they've learned, like right there and then. They can use it on the break. If it's a workshop, they can use it right there and then, and so on. And then entertain them by making it funny and storytelling, and making it a show. Because yeah, I mean, nobody likes a keynote speaker. I mean, you could be a speaker that has like the solution, like the cure for cancer. But if you have like a whiteboard or a screen that's with black bullets and like 25 bullets, and you're just reading the thing, the audience will all be asleep and nobody will be awake to realize, oh my God, that guy just cured cancer. Um, but if that person shares a story and makes it interesting to follow, and does it in a way that's empathetic with the audience, so that they understand that the audience understands, or that the audience doesn't understand. This gets into like body language. And a big thing that I do is, I was a speaker for Google for about 6 years. And so I would travel the country and Canada representing Google and teaching digital marketing skills, and for small businesses and things. I could tell from the audience that what I was speaking on wasn't computing. I was too advanced on what I was sharing. And so sometimes you share a presentation, especially if it's like a training, and you assume the audience will understand. And if the audience isn't understanding, you've got to shift gears if you want to be impactful. And so in that situation, I know, okay, hold on, let's bring it down a little bit and talk about what is Google. Google's a search engine that searches Google's snapshot of the internet. It doesn't search the entire internet. It's like going to a library and looking up a book in the database of the library, and so on. And those books are websites, and just kind of simplifying things so the audience understands what you're talking about. And you can see it. They light up. They're like, oh, okay. Right. And
All right,
and and the
can I give
opposite,
you a brilliant and?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you lit something up there
Yeah.
for me. Um, Again, I'm looking from the perspective of, okay, I'm a human being. I recognize I've got this story in my archives that keeps coming up. It's not the way I want to live my life, doesn't fit my values, keeps me stuck, keeps me out of relationship, whatever it is, it's not working. So I
Yeah.
want to create another story. And if we go back to your enlighten, empower, what was the
Entertain.
third
Yeah.
one?
Entertain.
Entertain. Um, so if I were to do that process on myself, what's the enlightenment here? It's like, oh, okay, I got this doesn't work. I need something else. I need to find something that fits for me and puts me on a different track or opens up new possibilities or gives me some new structure. Okay, empower. Well, do it now. Like
Sure. Yeah.
not just theorize about it, but how do I do it now so that I start building that muscle memory. I don't know if that's the absolutely appropriate analogy, but
Yeah.
sort of works.
It
Sort of
works.
the
Yeah.
muscle memory of, yes, this new story, I want to realize this new
Hmm.
story. Um, and then what's the third one?
You got to make it entertaining.
How do I entertain myself?
Yeah.
It's got to be interesting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it does, right? I mean, if it's, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a good example, because like, if it's not entertaining in the sense that it's impactful, right? In a way that keeps your attention, in a way that emits good feelings, let's say. or fear, whatever. But it's if it doesn't entertain you, then you're not gonna remember that, right? And maybe entertain. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch in the personal example, I think, maybe, but I still think it's relevant, like in the stories that you tell yourself.
Well, I know we both understand this, and I'm trusting most of our audience does too, but there's also this chemical component, our brain chemistry, and how
Yeah.
when we tell a certain kind of story or when we create a certain kind of story, it impacts our brain chemistry. Just as those archive stories were impacting our brain chemistry, but probably in a way that we didn't want it to. So
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do is to become master of our brain chemistry. You know?
Well, yeah, and you have to understand your brain chemistry, right? You have to understand your brain or your operating system, as I like to say, right? So with ADHD, something I learned is we lack dopamine. And so we seek ways to produce dopamine unknowingly, especially if you don't know you have ADHD. And so that can lead to all sorts of terrible things like addiction or overeating or impulsivity and driving your car too quickly and things like that, which then affects our life expectancy, which is up to 13 years less if you are undiagnosed and untreated. Or can be up to 13 years less. It's not up to 13. It can be up to 13 years less because of some of those things I just mentioned. So we're craving dopamine. But as a speaker and as an improviser and storyteller, when I step out in front of on a stage in front of the audience, oh, that's a lot of dopamine flowing at me. And as I tell a story and the audience is laughing, more dopamine. And then afterwards, when they're applauding at the end, dopamine. And when they're asking me questions, and when I leave the stage and meet the audience after shaking hands and hugging people or whatever, more dopamine. And so I've realized, again, this was one of those aha moments for me as a speaker and a person who loves networking and meeting people is I get this mass rush of dopamine when I'm lacking it. And so it's another reason why I'm like, oh, it doesn't mean every ADHDer is going to love public speaking or networking. I mean, um, but for me personally, I mean, it is a big source of dopamine. So even just having conversations like this with you and improvising as well. There's a doctor, and I talk about this in the Master Communicator Secret Weapon presentation. There's a doctor, Peter, I think it's, I forgot his name. It'll come to me. Um, and he put musicians in an MRI machine or an fMRI machine and studied their brains while they were like playing a keyboard, playing memorized music, and they would play the music and he would analyze the brain and see the brain being lit up in certain sections and so forth, which I can't talk about specifically because I don't understand. I'm not a doctor, right? Um, but and then the artist would start improvising on the piano, just making up stuff, and a whole other section of their brain lit up. And he's got it in these fMRI studies to show that your brain changes. And this is why, like, if you go to like a jazz show and they start improvising, it's always like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? They're it's incredible that improvised portion. Or if you go to an improv comedy show and they're a good troupe, and again, it's they're in sync, it's working really well. Um, Rap, like when a person is rapping, if they're freestyling, again, their brain lights up differently than if they're just, reciting lyrics that they already knew off by heart. So it's really fascinating studies. There is a TED talk on this.
Well, my limited understanding of brain chemistry, and I probably know more than some people, but I keep reminding myself that I'm not a neuroscientist, and I keep asking neuroscientists for more information as I have questions. But
Mm.
that dopamine is related to anticipation, it's related to mystery in ways. I am not sure what's going to come next, and that creates interest.
Hmm.
What is there out there? As opposed to cortisol, which is a stress chemical, which gets because I got to be on high alert and I got to, but it really can wear you out too, and it can get in your bloodstream and you stay on high alert way after you need to be.
Yeah.
So you end up living your life in a state that isn't optimal for enjoyment and connection and a few things like that that we might.
And I think that might, and again, yeah, we're not a couple of neurologists, so yeah, we're spitballing here, but yeah, I think that might tie into why anxiety and depression are the most common comorbidities for people with ADHD. And so what happens so often traditionally is, or not traditionally, but like women were often ignored, and I could talk about that, but because with ADHD, and so they were treated for anxiety or depression or OCD or whatever, which could be valid, but if without treating that root problem, that root cause, which is often the ADHD undiagnosed, it doesn't mean that you can have clinical anxiety or depression or what have you and not have ADHD. But, women especially, they traditionally would be diagnosed and treated for these things and not for ADHD because they weren't the naughty boy bouncing around the room, the Bart Simpson, as I like to say, because they just didn't really understand these three different presentations of ADHD. They only thought of one, and that was the Bart Simpson type, which was like
Right.
me. So, yeah.
So I want to see if we can do a little transition here,
Yeah.
uh, because there's this other thing that I'm really curious about. You've done a great job of helping me and hopefully our audience too learn a bit more about story tweaking, story creation. And there's this question of story transformation. Is that really possible to use story to transform something? And that would, for me, be you take a longstanding belief or perspective and you're able to turn it on its head
Mm,
and come up with a whole different way of relating to a person or a thing. And one of those things, I think, is this word networking.
mm.
And I think I'm talking to the guy who wrote a book on it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true in your experience, but I know a lot of people, and I've been to networking meetings. Not my people use the word, and immediately my danger comes up. It's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
not going to be. Now I'm going to be treating people not like people, but like they're a, you know, just a thing in the conveyor belt.
Yes.
So how can you help us transform our experience of networking? There's
So
a challenge. Lay down that glove.
yeah, and the book is about online and offline networking. So it's about networking online and, making connections and keeping in touch and so on. And then externally or offline rather at events and even organizing your own events in some cases, which is a lot of what I've done in the past. Um, yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't have chosen the word networking for my book, but I kind of went with my publisher, which I should preface this with the story that I'm at a conference um, as a speaker, but I haven't spoken yet. And I like one of my rules has always been to talk to strangers, unless you're my kids. Well, now they're old enough, I guess, to talk to strangers. But for the longest time, I'd say, unless you're my kids, no talking to strangers. Um, but is to talk to strangers. And I think nowadays we need to be doing it much more. Talk to anybody for that matter, but that's a different story too. Um, when you talk to strangers, so like I'm at this conference, I'm going to speak later. I am standing around, kind of killing time, and there's this woman behind this an exhibitor there who looks bored out of her tree, and she's sitting there like, and she's got these books. She's a publisher, and she's got these books on her table, kind of thing, on display. And I knew a couple of the authors, so I went over and just introduced myself and just started chit chatting about these author friends, and she said, "What's your book?" And I said, "I don't have a book." And she's like, "No, no, what's your book?" And I'd had this idea, as I've said, about this idea for this book, but never had said it out loud. Usually, my wife, God bless her, would hear all the crazy ideas before, or even if they didn't go anywhere. And I said, well, I've had an idea for this. And she's like, I love it. And we exchanged information. And next thing I knew, I had a contract advance and a book deal. And I'm like, oh crap. Now I got to write a book with undiagnosed ADHD, I might add. But I did successfully. So it was a while back. Um, Networking to me is sort of an icky word, as you said. Like you don't, I always say nice networking, right? Like you want to treat people well. You're not there to collect as many business cards as you can or whip as many of yours in people's faces like a blackjack dealer, right? You want to be there, meet a few people, you know, get a connection and then follow up with them afterwards and grab coffee or a Zoom call or whatever and get to know them better and then find ways to serve them and call it karma, plant the seeds, but by finding ways to provide value to the people in your community, your connections, your network, um, good things can come. And like you and I meeting, Jay, right? Like again, it comes from shared connections, and some of the best things in life come that way. Um, and so to make a networking event better, if you're an attendee, um, and if you're introverted or extroverted, shy, I mean, I've got strategies for all. But I think if you're going to a networking event or conference or something and you don't know anybody there, then seek out the wallflowers. Find the people standing by themselves looking awkward. And they usually have a name tag. I always say, like, when I do training and speak about networking, I always say, like, if somebody else has a lanyard or a name badge or whatever, that is your invitation to go and talk to them. You're allowed to go and talk to them. So, and to go and just, if you see somebody standing by themselves, go and introduce yourself. Because as I always say, nobody goes to a networking event because they want to be alone, right? You could stay at home for that. So you've gone to a networking event, seek those people out and go and have a little chat. Another tip is to arrive early. Arrive really early, and you'll be able to get to know the organizer who's kind of maybe killing time before all the people show up. So you get to know the organizer a little bit, find out maybe about the history of the event and why they organized this event and so on. Um, Another thing that I get into, which I know we don't have time for, is something, is active listening. And I go through this listen acronym and what that stands for. But one thing you want to try to do is also, let the other person do the bulk of the talking. And that's by asking open-ended questions and listening to them, really truly listening to them as they're answering, and avoid like one-upping their stories, which I used to do all the time before my diagnosis.
Oh, I got a
And
story about that. That
exactly.
but there is
Yeah.
there's you know what a call out is, in
Yeah.
like in a magazine you have that bit that they take out and put in bigger print. The call
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
I got from listening to you is uh, nobody goes to a networking event to be alone.
Yes.
That's gold. And
Thanks.
it's evidence for me too that you can have a story that is so short. It doesn't have to be a, a long, long story. It can
Yeah.
be one word. It can be something that's a phrase like that, which is really memorable.
Yeah.
Is there another word if we had the opportunity now to reinvent the word, um, so that it didn't show up for our brains like what would it be?
That's a really great question. I don't know because I've never thought about that. But it is a really good question. I think the challenge is by changing the name, you like if you are hosting or organizing a networking event, which is like an event where professionals are coming together casually, usually to get to know one another. Maybe you've got some activities to help them help that. If you call it something it isn't, or not that it isn't, but like if you make up a word or something, people may not understand. And this is something I've struggled with myself because I come up with all sorts of original names for things, but often the names themselves don't define or answer what the thing is. So maybe my publisher was right. So for example, if I had called it like, you know, professional gatherings or pro gathers or prathers or whatever, Pratherfest. Um, if I called the book New Prathering, you'd be like, what the hell's that? And if you even stop to think about it, right? but because the book was called New Business Networking, you're like, okay, new business, yes, I need new business networking, yes. So I can't answer the question. I don't know what the new word would be, but that's why I came up with something called networking nicely, or I came up with a website and stuff for the longest time called networking nice or network nicely. Um, but even now, I came up with something not too long ago because oftentimes somebody will ask me at a networking event, "What do you do, Dave?" And I do a lot, as we've clearly talked about here, and a whole lot more. And even in answering your question originally about this communication umbrella, I mean, blah, blah, blah. It's like a 10-minute answer to like all the things I can do. So I came up with the solution and I just redesigned my business cards for networking now, which is my logo. And it just says, I solve problems. And and it's got a little QR code with a surprise for people that meet me and stuff. But so the purpose is that, first of all, I if I go to a networking event, I'm there to meet people. Um, so if we meet there, Jay, and you say, "What do what do you do, Dave?" I might say, "Oh, I solve problems." Um, but usually, yeah, usually they're related to communication problems. Um, what kind of communication problems are you facing these days? And you'll turn it around and be like, "Oh, I'm fine, no problems." Eh, you'll probably say something. Oh, you know what? Actually, our team at work is growing so quickly and people don't know each other anymore. Or, I'm overwhelmed with all these different channels, email, Slack, Google, whatever. Um, or I'm new to this event and I guess I don't know what to say to answer that question. Okay. Um, it prompts the person I'm meeting with to be able to answer the question. And then when they answer that question, I can hopefully listen and think, oh, well, I could probably help you with that. And it doesn't mean selling you something, but it could be, I'm new to town and I guess I don't know who to communicate with. Okay. What are your interests or where are you, and get to know them a little bit and then help to solve those problems or at least book a coffee or something so we can talk more about those communication problems. And then if it is something I can solve, then I could pitch that person and say, hey, this is actually what I do. I'd love to, talk about that and maybe you'll hire me. Or I might I would know somebody. Well, I'm trying to figure out my story. Oh, well, maybe I'm not the guy, but I know the guy who is. And I would introduce them to you, Jay. So it's for me, it's solving problems. And that actually came because of Pulp Fiction, Harvey Keitel's character. If you go to davedelaney.me, I just created a special page there. Um, and also with information about Pulp Fiction if you're not familiar. So, but Harvey Keitel in the movie plays the guy that solves problems, basically.
That's fantastic. And I know we're running out of time here, but you said I asked you this question and you said I don't know. And I don't know is one of my favorite phrases because I think it's a it's a multitude of stories. And it can mean anything from something that's shameful. Gosh, I don't know. But it can also be on the other end, the beginning of wonders. It's like, gosh, I don't know. Um, so I can hopefully leave you with that, continuing to wonder about whether we want to call it schmetworking or that would go, okay, well,
That-
what's that? Schmetworking? Well, it's like
yeah.
networking, but with a schmile.
Maybe that's it. Maybe you just nailed it. Uh, yeah, I think it's there's a lot to this stuff, but I think yeah, and I encourage folks, anyone watching or listening, to reach out to me if they have questions about anything I've covered or talked about, or because I love helping people, and that's why I'm doing coaching and speaking and stuff like that. So
Pretty clear. So thank you for your graciousness. Thank you for your contributions here. Thank you for your brilliance, your life experience. Um, and who knows, we may do this again if we decide that there's more to talk about.
I would love that. That would be fun. And thank you, Jay. I mean, you're always so inspiring to me and gracious with your time and insights, and you're sharing so much value too with all the community members. So yeah, it's an honor to know you, man. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Bye bye.